Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. As some of you may have saw, I made a post on Reddit. Let's pop that up. I posted asking if anyone wanted to ask me questions, and I would answer them in a little Q&A format. My thoughts about competitive EDH as a whole, the philosophy that I take towards it, and we got some great responses, so I'm going to go through some of them now. Let's pop back over to Moto. Alright, so from you, Sir Ozsome, he asked if I exclusively played dual/French Commander, and by dual I assume he's meaning 1v1, even though French Commander is formerly named Dual Commander. It uses an alternate ban list for those of you who are unfamiliar, and I do play it. It's just MTGO doesn't support the format very well. Because in the format, you're allowed to play with cards that are currently banned on Moto EDH, like Primeval Titan, Sylvan Primordial, Emrakul the Ion's Torn, Gristlebrand, Braids, but you can't play with things like Sol Ring, Mana Crypt, Mana Vault, Grim Monolith, Ancient Tomb. I think the format's actually very balanced. I haven't played it in a little while now, though, so don't quote me on that for the current state of it. The last time I played was right after Gaia's Cradle got banned in Dual Commander. But my local meta does host Dual Commander tournaments every now and then. For that format, I play a Meren of Clan Neltoth stacks combo deck, and it's remarkably efficient at the meta because you can play so many mana dorks, and no one else has fast mana, so you're never against a Sol Ring draw. But on MTGO, I almost exclusively play 1v1 Commander with a little bit of multiplayer sprinkling in. Which brings me to the next topics. I do plan on getting some more multiplayer gameplays in the coming weeks, hopefully. And as well as once this work in progress Rashmi deck is finished, I'm trying to build this also with multiplayer in mind. So that way I'll have a deck that I can go to for multiplayer beyond just the regular that, like trying to use one of my 1v1 decks for a multiplayer format. So I have that in mind for this Rashmi build as I go through it. I'll leave it up if you want to take a look at it. So Alones Kaji, Cagi, was asking about more Rashmi videos, and I do have some plans for that. I've been trying to tune this and see how I like the slots. I'm playing with just some proxies in paper, like giving it a shuffle up, see if I like the opening hands. I'm still working out a couple kinks. I don't know if Bribery's right where I need it to be, and Torrential Gear Hulk seems a little bit expensive, but it's a new card, and I like testing new cards that have an incredible effect like that. Because imagine if you Torrential Gear Hulk Amnesia, or no, is this specifically instant card? Yeah, sorry, Torrential Gear Hulk, the Force of Will, or a Foff. So you get a 5/6 flash, and you're using Fact or Fiction to draw 2 to 3 cards. Feels pretty good. So I think Gear Hulk might be good, might not. I'm going to have to see. But so more Rashmi videos will be coming soon, hopefully. Obnoxiousness was a little upset about my obnoxious 7th edition lands, particularly my forests. Come on, man. It's John Avon. Yes, that squiggly swamp-looking tree is in fact a forest. But I play white borders mostly because they're carryovers from my paper decks. I have white border shocklands, I have white border duels, and when you're playing a 100-card deck double-sleeved, especially with my Tazri list, I really enjoy being able to crack my fetch, fan my deck, and then just shortcut to the white borders. Furthermore, when you fetch for a white border Watery Grave that had to be altered to be that way, you get a nice tilt factor from some opponents. So I'm a little bit of a troll in that regard, considering Rashmi is currently playing a Time Twister in the deck as well. You get some great reactions when you white border a Shockland into a Time Twister, and they just look at you like you got 3 heads. So that is why I play white borders, and honestly, they don't bother me at all. I don't mind white border, black border. I'm not real keen on the issue. It doesn't matter. I wouldn't mind if they brought it back for reprints. Obey Celestia brought up a question of what philosophy do I have that runs counter to common EDH wisdom, and do I have a philosophy when it comes to deck building or card selection? And I do have one sort of rule when I go into building a new commander. If I'm cold to the deck, I'm not familiar with really the ins and outs of building it or the meta surrounding it. So I did this when Tazri was first spoiled, and I saw that she tutored for a creature. All right, so how can I make tutor for an ally when she enters broken? And that's how we, on Reddit, we came up with the food chain Tazri list. Like, tutor for ally, win game. So the way that my philosophy for building EDH is a card has to hit one of three criteria or meet a fourth very exceptional or fourth exception to the rule, so to speak. So my three criteria are, does it provide me card advantage? Does it ramp me ahead of my opponent? Or does it get me back from a losing situation? So, and all of these criteria need to be evaluated on the card is allowed to has to be able to stand by itself or be able to combo with specifically the commander. Because I know I'm going to have access to my commander every game, it's okay to rely on a card that works well with the commander. So something like Training Grounds I don't think is very good by itself, but in a Tasigur deck where it changes one activation of Tasigur into two activations, it's more reasonable to play. So the caveat to these standards that I have for the card is if it is something like Mystical Tutor, it is card disadvantage. It doesn't get me back from a losing situation right away, but it can get me to a position because it gives me access to other cards. So tutors are generally these types of exceptions to the rule. Shackles is one of those things that it doesn't get me back from a losing situation, but it every time, but it can keep me from losing. So that's my sort of thought process while building decks and card selection. And if it doesn't provide me one of those three things, I don't really want to run it in the deck. Cards that are only good when they're with one of the other cards in your 99, and other times they're not worth playing at all, don't make the cut, in my opinion. I was having this conversation actually last night with one of our locals. He was talking about Archmage Ascension. It is a counter enchantment from Zendikar block, and it was at the beginning of each end step. If you've drawn two or more cards this turn, put a quest counter on it, and then if it has, whenever you would draw a card, if Archmage Ascension has like 6 or more or 7 or more counters, instead of draw, you get to Demonic Tutor. All right, well, Demonic Tutor instead of every single draw is pretty good, but my issue with it is that unless you're playing a commander that specifically gives you the ability to draw cards, I don't think Archmage Ascension is a good card. I could see it in about 75% Azami decks because Azami gives you the ability to trigger it every turn once Azami has been put into play. But in something like, let's say, an Animar deck, you have no guaranteed source of second card draw. So in a situation in the game where you are behind on board and you don't have a second draw, it is one of the worst top decks that you could possibly get in your deck because it's almost as if you didn't draw a card that turn. Like, you got one card that maybe you have to pitch if they make you discard something, but that's the extent of its usefulness then. So it's just a random example, but a card that needs another card in your deck to even be good and is bad by itself, I don't think is going to be able to stand on its own in EDH. So let's see. Barbara Shenyu brought up how do you deal with reading the differences in primers between competitive EDH, regular EDH, and dual commander. And my opinion is if I'm looking at a dual commander primer and I'm trying to adjust it to 1v1 traditional ban list, I'm cutting a land, I'm adding Mana Crypt, just 1-for-1 almost every single time. And I know that I can push the curve up a little bit because I get fast mana back. Because I get Ancient Tomb if I'm playing in paper. I obviously don't have it online, as you can see right here. But because you get fast mana back, you can push the curve a little bit. In Dual Commander, the curve is the most important thing to consider when you're building your deck beyond your strategy of how to win the game. But in traditional ban lists, you can push it a little bit, and that's why you see players like myself, Brian Weissman, Nate Prodzig, all playing these cards at the top end, like Amnesia, Gilded Lotus, is because we get this fast mana at the lower end. You can afford to play these types of spells that normally don't do like they just cost so much, so they're so clunky in an opening hand. But your mana fixes itself as the game goes on. If you get to play these Soul Ring, Mana Vault, Mana Crypt, hell, even Mox's Ancient Tombs, City of Traders, if you're really on the Soul Land train. But so for me, it's just making some of those cuts. You get to add in things like Vampiric Tutor. You get to add in some things, and naturally you have to cut the stuff that traditional doesn't allow. Primeval Titan, Sylvan Primordial, Braids, Emrakul if you're playing a big mana deck, and Gristlebrand for sure. Honestly, I don't think Gristlebrand should ever be in the 99, even in Dual Commander, because if you get bribery, you lose the game, and that is a card that is played in Dual Commander. So reading the differences in primers isn't that difficult, because I always look at it as a primer or a deck list that someone wants me to critique, or that I'm using as an inspiration for my own deck. I'm looking at it as a skeleton. I'm looking at it, all right, what's the game plan? How does it interact with the commander? How can I improve upon it? And I'm always looking at a deck list as, how can I improve upon this deck list? Instead of looking at it, these are the hard and fast 99 that you have to play every single time. And once you change that sort of view set, you start seeing how deck lists, as long as it's built with a competitive mindset, can be adapted between variations of the format. So, Barbershan, you also asked about curve topping cards in the MTGO meta versus a paper meta where there's more Staxy style decks, and you can't really afford to play a 5-drop in stacks or against a meta that has stacks, or a 6-drop like Amnesia. And my opinion for that is, if stacks is becoming that much of a problem for you, you have two answers. You can sort of lean into the stacks and play the grindier matchup, in which case I would recommend a deck swap to a grind commander, something like Morass or Nath, where you can out-stacks the stacks deck, so to speak. Even though, because keep in mind, most stacks decks are fairly symmetrical, or stacks effects are fairly symmetrical. If you can put yourself in the position where playing that smokestack or that null rod or whatever they're playing is actually hindering them more than helping them, you are in a fantastic position. Furthermore, some of the cards that are played in mono black stacks on MTGO, or black X stacks decks like Nath on MTGO, like Nether Void and the Abyss, aren't as good in paper just because of the availability issue. Less people are going to have Tabernacle, Bazaar, Time Twister in paper than they're going to have on MTGO. Those high money cards are sort of a barrier to some of the stacks archetypes and building them as strong as possible. Your other option for playing against stacks in a paper meta where you don't really have 5 and 6 drops is to play the mid-range deck. And you got to plan that they're going to have sphere effects, stacks effects, and most of the sphere effects affect non-creature spells. So some red-green or red-green X deck might be the way to go. Red-green-blue, potentially. Animar decks do very well against stacks because the discount can apply to additional spells, because Sphere of Resistance adds 1 to the cost of the spell. But if Animar is already over-reducing the cost of the spell, including that 1, you still only have to pay 1 mana for your Cloud of Fairies or whatever it is. So those would be my 2 suggestions for stacks. One of the best anti-stacks commanders, I think, is Morass, Will of the Wild, currently banned in Dual Commander. I think it's banned in Dual Commander now. Yeah. So the way that Morass is good is early game, mid game, late game. Morass is always a good spell to play. It is always going to do something you want. It's either going to create creatures that you can feed to the Smokestack or the Abyss. It's going to burn their Hate Bear creatures if they have Thalias, if they have Hushwing Gryphs, if they have Aven Mind Sensors, it's going to kill them. And if they have Planeswalkers, it can burn them out. So, And if not, you have this. If you don't need any of that, you have a giant beater that you can feed into Skull Clamp and win the hand battle, so to speak. So I think Morass, Will of the Wild, is one of your best non-blue options to deal with Stack's deck. It's also one of the decks that goes from about a tier 2 to a tier 1.5 strictly by adding Gaia's Cradle to the list. Alright, so Glasshouse Failure asks, are there ways to win that don't involve mana denial? And my opinion on that is yes. There are ways that involve not destroying your opponent's mana or destroying their mana development. That said, it is one of the best ways to secure a victory, is to counter their explosive vegetation. Because if you think of Magic as a zero-sum game, and at a certain point that's what it is, each player in a 1v1 match draws 1 card per turn and plays 1 land per turn. So everyone's in parity. When you can start getting ahead of that parity or putting your opponent behind, that's where the game ends. So when they play Explosive Vegetation, they spent 1 card, but they put extra mana into play. So they've gone down a card and they have 1 less access to you, but they have a better chance of being able to play more spells, which will then get them more cards or more card advantage. Because by playing Explosive Vegetation, they're giving themselves access to the rest of the cards in their hand or that they could potentially draw, which are generally going to be removal or cards that trade 1 for 1 or 2 for 1. Or once they have that mana available to them. So there's ways to beat it, or to beat decks that don't involve denying the mana, but I think the best way to secure a victory, or at least not lose a game if you're trying to keep parity in a control shell, is to stymie mana development. And that might be countering the Cultivate. I think you guys have most likely seen me counter Cultivate at least 2 or 3 times on my channel if you've seen all my videos, because it's giving them a land drop, so it's replacing itself because it's drawing them any basic land out of their deck, but it's also putting a land into play. So that amount of value is pretty good, and it's going to put them ahead of me by 1, and it's guaranteeing that they have a drop next turn. I'm a control deck. I cannot afford my opponent to have the ability to play 2 spells in 1 turn when I can only have 1. The decks that can play regardless of their opponent's mana development are the decks that you would look at and say, all right, it's going to beat an Azusa deck. In a zero-sum game, it's going to beat Azusa. And Azusa is sort of my prime example of it. Another one would be Mina and Den Wildborn. Because it gets extra land drops, they're always going to have more than you at a certain point. And those decks are going to be effects that are almost always combo. You're not winning a control matchup when your opponent has access to more cards than you and access to more mana. So you have to stymie them on one of the sides. The way to prevent them from having access to more cards is to just kill them. And things like Doomsday, like a Tendrils Storm Turn, things like Tazri Food Chain, it doesn't matter at a certain point because, oh, they tapped out, they don't have Disruption or Counter Magic, I just win. It doesn't matter how much mana they have at the end of the game because the game ends when a player hits 0 life. It doesn't end when someone hits no mana or hits 50 mana. The game ends at 0 life. And if you can disrupt an opponent just a little bit, whether it's their hand, their board, their mana, and really punish them for focusing their turns on mana development instead of board development, that's where you sort of can win that game. Let me pop over to another deck so you guys have something else to look at. Alright, so this is the Tasker Lance deck that I'm using now. Alright, so Smuggler's Run asks for underrated cards in EDH, and I don't have a specific order to these, but I wanted to just name a couple. I built a little bit of a list. I have Amnesia as one of them, and I think you guys have seen both on my channel and on Brian Weissman's channel, if you've subscribed to him as well, that Amnesia can end the game just by itself. It is a mind twist in blue that you can Mystical Tutor for, and you just destroy your opponent. If you use Cyclonic Rift on their end step into Amnesia, game's gonna end. I don't see how any deck's gonna come back from that, short of having a very, very good next draw step or 2 draw steps. Pithing Needle. I see a lot of decks don't run it, and if you are in blue and you have this card card called Trinket Mage. I recommend running Pithing Needle in decks, and of course my Tasker deck isn't currently playing it because I haven't found a slot for it yet to cut. Because Pithing Needle, more often than not, there's going to be something that you want to shut down. It might be an activated ability, maybe the Fauna Shaman, maybe one of their equipments, or Thrasios, Tasker. There's always stuff that you can shut down with Pithing Needle and get good value out of it. You shut down their Expedition map if they don't have the mana to crack it in response. There's never bad things. Notably, you can also shut down Deathrite Shaman and cancel 2 of his abilities, not 3. Because I don't think you can stop the first ability because it's a mana ability. Next cards on there are the Diamonds that were originally printed in Mirage, reprinted in 7th edition as white borders for my collection, and have been printed in the most recent Commander product. In 2-color decks, they're basically Signets number 2 and 3. In monocolor decks, they are your Signet, and honestly, they are the pseudo-Moxen of EDH. Especially when you have a meta that's about 75 to 85% competitive decks. You resolve your Diamond, and then for the rest of the game, nobody's very afraid of you having a Diamond. It's a colorless rampant growth, effectively, and it allows every color to have a rampant growth effect, so to speak. And colors that struggle with the mana development, like red and white, definitely want those types of effects, as well as black, potentially. It depends on how many mana doublers your black deck plays. Next one would be the targeted kill spells that have a modal ability. So I'm thinking cards like Putrefy, like Mortify. Putrefy destroys artifact or creature. Mortify is enchantment or creature. Hero's Downfall is Planeswalker or creature. Anguish Unmaking is exile target permanent, you lose 3 life. Vindicate. These types of targeted removal that are ideally instant speed, but if it's good enough, like Vindicate, that it hits at absolutely anything, sorcery speed's fine. These effects can't be understated for EDH. Even something as simple as Nature's Claim makes the cut in a competitive list because it can deal with 2 different permanent types that are fairly difficult to deal with outside of green, especially in a blue-black-green deck. And it does it at an extremely budget cost. Giving them 4 life means nothing. I destroyed something that matters to them more than the 4 life is going to. So I think that people undervalue them and tend to skimp a little bit every now and then on them. And if your opponent's skipping on their targeted removal, you can really punish them for that. Finally, the other card that I have is Mystic Remora. And I list Mystic Remora here because it's sort of a 2-part, Mystic Remora and Rhystic Study. Too often have I lost games in multiplayer for my paper meta where my opponents are not paying for one of the other opponents' Rhystic Study, and they're just feeding them cards the entire game. As if Rhystic Study draws 1 card in your game, your opponents have done something wrong, in my opinion. It's the easiest card to play around, and giving them that 1 card that essentially they spent Rhystic Study to draw a card, and then it's replaced itself, but it's taxing all of your opponents. So it's a sphere resistance that then taxed everybody, and will eventually have to be removed by some spell, or it will sit on the game board the entire game. So that type of effect is so good when you even get a single card off of it. That single tax that an opponent doesn't pay is backbreaking, or can be backbreaking. Naturally, as soon as one person doesn't pay for it, the next opponent in order says, well, you let him have 1 card, so I can let him have 1 card. And you get into that political situation. So if you're listening to my channel, I really, really hope you always pay for Rhystic Study. Now that leads me to the Mystic Remora of 4 mana is too much for most opponents to pay. They will not pay 4 mana. And the correct way to beat Mystic Remora is, at least in 1v1, make them keep spending mana on it. As long as you are hitting your land drops, you don't have to push cards into it. Let them waste mana on it every turn, because that means they're not developing their board anyway. If they keep feeding it, don't play spells. Just make your land drops pass the turn. Make your land drops pass the turn. And if you have instant speed interaction for the turn that they let it go away and have mana, you're in fantastic shape. But too often, Mystic Remora has drawn me 2-3 cards, and if I hadn't drawn those 2-3 cards, I would have lost the game. But I'll usually let Mystic Remora go about the turn that I would have to pay 3 or 4 for it. So the reason I do that is, think of your mana cost to cards drawn on other printed cards. So Divination is blue 2, draw 2. So if I pay blue and 3, or that's a concentrate, sorry, that's blue 3, blue 2, draw 3. And so if I paid a blue mana for the investment, and then 1, and then 2, I've paid 4 mana into the Remora, and it's drawn me 3 or more cards, I consider it a mana neutral play, so to speak. Especially because I played that concentrate on turn 1 instead of turn 4. And on turn 4, I have my mana untapped again. So I look at it in that sort of vacuum. Those are my underrated cards. And now the next question is about tiers. And I'm going to talk about tiers, but I want to address it in another video, so that's completely devoted to how I view tiers in EDH, because I definitely want to go into some discussion about a couple of the commanders. So, like always, don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video if it's the content you enjoy. And I'll link in the description to the Reddit post if you want to see some of the other questions that people asked. And I think I responded to almost everything in the Reddit post as well at the time of recording this. And keep your eyes and ears out for the next video, which will be my tier discussion list and some of the other questions that regard to which commanders can be competitive, can you build budget competitive decks, and who's going to be at the top of the leaderboards when every commander is played an equal amount, who's going to be winning the most games. All right, see you all in the next one.